Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Daf Kuf Chaf Aleph. We are at the third line from the top. The Gemara concluded for us that according to Rabbi Yossi, Tvila Bizmana Mitzvah, there is an obligation to be tovel at the appointed time. One is not meant to delay to the next day. And as Rashi explains, it's Rashi here on top at the first line, beginning with the word Tvila Bizmana Mitzvah, says Rashi T'chsiv B'hai Lifneis Erev Yirachas B'mayim. The Torah is speaking about one who is tummy, and the Torah tells him to be tovel Lifneis Erev, prior to darkness, to nightfall. The Torah is telling him, you meant to do it today. Don't wait, don't delay till tomorrow. So this is the Shita of Rabbi Yossi, Tvila Bizmana Mitzvah. Says the Gemara, is that really the case? Third line from the top. V'savar Rabbi Yossi, Tvila Bizmana Mitzvah. Is that what it really holds? V'atani, but haven't we learned in a brisa? This is referring to Yom Kippur. Generally speaking, one is not meant to bathe in Yom Kippur. Rechitza is prohibited. But we're speaking about a Tvila Shal Mitzvah, which is not considered to be for pleasure's sake, and therefore it's mutter. Says the brisa, what happens if one's day of Tvila falls out on Yom Kippur, on the day of Yom Kippur, or on the night of Yom Kippur? Says the brisa, he is meant to be tovel. V'atanya, haven't we learned in the brisa, hazav v'hazava, different forms of tumah, v'metzoyra, metzoyras, boil nida, tmemes, all these different various forms of people who are tummy. Tfilasan b'yoyim. So these people are tovel on the seventh day, by day, even though the entire day has not yet passed. They only observed part of that seventh day. We employ the halacha of miktsasayim kekuloi. So part of the day is considered as though we already observed the entire day. So all these individuals, once they reach their seventh day, Tfilasan b'yoyim, they are tovel on that day, even though that day falls out on Yom Kippur. Nida v'yoyledis. So these individuals, Nida v'yoyledis, woman who gave birth, Tfilasan b'layla. When it comes to them, they need to wait the entire 7-day period. They are tovel on the night following the completion of the seventh day. Now, what happens if that night is actually the night of Yom Kippur? They are tovel then, because they need to be tovel bizmana. They need to be tovel at the appointed time. Continues the brisa, Baal Keri, one who had this omission, he's tamei, tovel v'hoilach kol yom kuloi. Likewise, when it comes to his Yom Tvila, he's tovel at any point during Yom Kippur, the entire day, meaning at any point in time that he needs to be tovel, he will be tovel. Now, even though he already finished davening, and as we know about Keri, the Chachamim prevented him from saying words of Torah, words of Tefillah, and he already completed all his Tefillahs. Nevertheless, says the Tanakama here, he is tovel v'hoilach kol yom kuloi at any point during the day, because although he doesn't need to daven anymore, but he needs to be tovel today because Tvila Bizmana Mitzvah. So this is this shita, that all the individuals will be tovel on Yom Kippur. They need to be tovel on Yom Kippur because Tvila Bizmana Mitzvah. Rabbi Yossi Omer, no, he disagrees. There's no mitzvah to be tovel at the appointed time. So all these different types of people who are tummy, the zav, etc., they don't need to be tovel on Yom Kippur. If they would like to, they could, because as we said earlier, there's no isser to do a Tvila Shal Mitzvah on Yom Kippur, but there's no requirement. Now, even when it comes to a Baal Keri who is prevented from davening, says Rabbi Yossi, well, it depends. If it's minha mincha ulamal ein tzarich, if it's already past mincha time, you already daven mincha, then when it comes to him, likewise, he doesn't need to be tovel because he's already daven. And what about tfilas ni'ila? Rashi explains that according to Rabbi Yossi, ni'ila can be davened at night, so he doesn't need to be tovel Yom Kippur. Says Rabbi Yossi, ein tzarich, he has no need to be tovel Yom Kippur, ein tzarich litval. So according to Rabbi Yossi, it's very clear that Tvila Bizmana is not mitzvah. There's no obligation, no mitzvah to be tovel at the appointed time. Therefore, he says there's no need to be tovel Yom Kippur. Only by his Baal Keri, if he's still holding before Tefillah, fine. In order to enable him to daven, then he has no choice. He has to be tovel. But otherwise, he doesn't need to be tovel on Yom Kippur. So this is in contrast with what the Gemara said earlier, that according to Rabbi Yossi, Tvila Bizmana mitzvah. Says the Gemara, it's a different Rabbi Yossi. I hear Rabbi Yossi over Yehuda. This Rabbi Yossi here, who maintains that there's no Tvila Bizmana mitzvah, is Rabbi Yossi over Yehuda. The Amar, because we find indeed that he says elsewhere, the Amar that he said, Daya Tvila Bachroina. it is sufficient to have one tefillah at the end of the whole uncertain period. We're speaking about a woman who is confused with her calculations, and she has many potential appointed times of tefillah, and we're not sure when those days are actually, when exactly all her appointed times are. Therefore, we have various systems employed in order to ensure that she does the right tefillah at the right time. We make her be tovel many times, as discussed in the Gemara in Nida. Rabbi Yehuda maintains there's no need to do that. Let her wait until the whole time period is over, until she's finished all her uncertainties and sveikas and doubts, and do one tefillah all the way at the end, because there's no mitzvah to be tovel at the appointed time. Daya, it is enough for her tefillah b'achrein, it is enough to have one tefillah at the end. So he holds tefillah b'zmana is not a mitzvah, and he is the one who is featured in this brayse as well. The Rabbi Yossi who says men amincha mal ein tzarich, it's Rabbi Yossi or Yehuda. Whereas the other Rabbi Yossi, who is Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, he is the Rabbi Yossi that we referenced earlier, who holds that tefillah b'zmana is mitzvah. Continues the Mishnah. Nachri shebal Shabbos. So there's a fire that broke out on Shabbos, and a non-Jew comes along to put out the fire. How do we deal with this? Do we allow him? Do we stop him? Ein oimrim loi kabei va'al techabe. We don't tell him kabei. We don't tell him to actually extinguish it. We can't order him. We can't instruct him to do so, because one may not tell a guy to do a malach on Shabbos. But at the same time, we don't need to prevent him. We don't need to tell him al techabe, don't do it. Just let him do it on his own. Because his resting on Shabbos is not our responsibility, is not their responsibility. Therefore, they can allow him to do what he wants. But this is in contrast to if a katan, a Jewish minor comes to put out a fire. They don't listen, they don't allow him to do it. Because his rest on Shabbos is their obligation. We are obligated to have the katan rest on Shabbos. We can't allow him to do malacha. Let's see Rashi inside here. So it's Rashi towards the bottom of the Amud, right where the lines get wide. So the Rashi there begins with Masnisan, Ein oimrim loi kabei. We may not tell the guy, instruct him to put out the fire. Rabbanan gozer ala amir l'nachim mishum shvus. Rabbanan made a gzera and prohibited telling a nachi to do a malacha. It's a shvus. One may not do so. One need not protest and prevent him from doing it. Just leave him and let him do what he wants. Let the fire department put out the fire. The shvisa of the guy is not the responsibility of the Yidden. The Yisrael ain't a muzar al shvisa shel nachri sheni avdi, because a Yid is not, he's not muzar. He does not have a tziva, an obligation to. He's not warned on the shvisa of a guy who happens not to be his slave. So if it's a stranger, he has no obligation to have him rest on Shabbos. Therefore, he can allow the nachri to put out the fire. Continues the Gemara. So the Mishnah told us we may not tell him kabei, nor do we need to tell him al techabe. What about something in between? Amar Rab Ami, b'deleika, when it comes to a fire which breaks out and there's monetary loss involved, says Rav Ami, there's a leniency. But like the Chacham allowed him to say, he can make this announcement: whoever puts out the fire will not lose, will not go unrewarded. So it's not a direct shliach. He's not instructing him to do that, but he understands that he's going to get paid for his effort. Says the Gemara, name him Sayele. Perhaps we can have a raya support to this chiddush, to this halacha from our Mishnah. The Mishnah says, if the guy comes to extinguish the fire, we don't tell him extinguish, we don't tell him stop, because his rest is not our obligation. So let's make a diuk, an inference. To actually tell him to put out the fire, that we may not tell him. But to merely announce it in this formula, whoever puts out the fire will not lose, that we can tell him. So it's a dik, it's an inference from the lashon of the Mishnah. We cannot tell him kabeh, you can't instruct him to extinguish, but to use this indirect terminology, that's okay. Says the Gemara, but Ema Seifa. Let's take a look at the next part of the Mishnah. Al Techabe. The Mishnah says we don't tell him kabei. So from there you had a diuk that this other term would be allowed. But the Mishnah says we don't tell him al techabe, right? Al techabe lo yamrina le. We don't tell him don't put it out. So that we don't need to tell him. But we can infer from here we have a diuk. We don't need to tell him don't put it out. But apparently it stops there. You can't go further than that. You can't actually tell him. That too. So we have conflicting inferences. We have conflicting diyukim. From the first part of the Mishnah, we seem to imply that to go say kol ha'machabe mafsid is okay, because the Mishnah is specifically saying you can't tell him to put it out. But anything less than that, something indirectly would be mutter. But the Mishnah proceeds by saying you don't need to tell him to stop, but imply from there that that's up to there. You can't go ahead and actually tell him something even indirectly. Even by saying kol ha'machabe mafsid, you're doing something wrong. Indeed, we can't have any conclusion, any clarity from here, because we're not sure which wording of the Mishnah is the one that's precise, and which one is imprecise, which is merely coming as as part of a symmetrical style to complete the other precise part of the statement. We don't know which one is the one that we make a dig from. We have two conflicting diyukim, so we don't know which one to follow, and therefore we can't have a raya from here. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Brisa. There was a story, an incident, that a dleika broke out, a fire broke out b'chatzerei shel Yosef, in the courtyard of Yosef ben Simoy, b'shichin, in this place called Shichin. Ubo anshe gistra, now it was on Shabbos. Ubo anshe gistra shel Tzipori l'chabes. And the fellows from the gistra shel Tzipori, the authority, the Roman authority in Tzipori, came l'chabes to put out the fire. So the fire department came to extinguish the fire. Because he was a distinguished fellow, he was the treasurer of the king. So he wanted to come help and put out his fire. He didn't allow them to extinguish the fire due to the honor of Shabbos. And a miracle occurred for him. And it began raining. And the rain put out the fire. Le'erev, at night, Matzai Shabbos, Shigir l'cha'echad mehen, he went out and he sent, as a goodwill gesture, he went and he sent for each one of the fellows that came, shtei slaim, 2 slaim, ula farchash b'hem, and to their boss, he sent 50 slaim. He paid them for their efforts. When the Chacham heard the story, Amru, they said, Lo yahi tzarech l'kach. He didn't need to refuse their assistance, Sharishanina, because we learned in the Mishnah, if a Gentile comes to put out the fire, we don't tell him to put it out, but we don't tell him al techabe. We don't need to prevent him from doing it. Therefore, it wasn't really necessary to do what he did. But apparently, he was trying to be extra meticulous with honoring Shabbos and refused their help. And indeed, as a result of his dedication to Shabbos, a miracle occurred. It began raining, and the fire was extinguished. Continues the Gemara. Aval katan shebalachabes. However, if a katan comes to put out the fire, ain't shemilay. We don't let him, because we are obligated to have the katan rest on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Shabbos mina. We hear from here, katan oichel neveles. If there's a katan who is eating neveles, which is forbidden food, bezdin mitzuvan olav lafrishay. Bezin is commanded to prevent him, la frishay. Because we see over here that we cannot let the katan do malach on Shabbos. Now Tosfos points out what type of katan we're speaking about. We're not speaking about a katan which is already higia lechinuch, which has arrived at the age which we are obligated to train him to do mitzvahs, because in that case, certainly, there will be no reason to allow him to do the extinguishing of the fire. But we're speaking about a small katan, a very young katan, in which there's no chiyuv of chinuch yet. We're not obligated to train him yet. And we know, as Rashi points out, that there's a machlekes, there's a shita. This Mishnah seems to be in conflict with the shita that says that one may allow the katan to eat neveles. We can allow him to do isurim. So how can the Mishnah says that we must prevent the katan? Now, when the Gemara uses the term Bezdin Mitzuvin, the Bezdin is obligated, it's using the word Bezdin loosely. It means that we, Klal Yisrael, who see a katan doing this, we must prevent him. So the Mishnah here seems to say that, which is in conflict with the Shita that allows. Says the Gemara, we're not speaking about just a katan coming and doing it on his own. We're speaking about a katan who's doing it, who's acting on behalf of his father's interest. So takes a look at his father standing nearby, and he discerns in his expression of his face that he's pleased with what he's doing. So he's acting on behalf of his father's interest. In this case, it's not just a katan who's doing an isser. It's as though the father is instructing him to do it. He's doing it for the sake of the father in this case. Certainly, the father may not allow the katan to do malacha for him. So that's why we must stop the katan. Says the Gemara, the kavasaga benachri. If so, let's draw a parallel to the other halacha regarding the nachri. Right? The Mishnah says the nachri comes, we can allow him to put out the fire. Now, if we're speaking about the ka'ava l'data di Yisrael, are we speaking about that he's doing it? He's acting on behalf of the interest of the Yisrael. Nachri the ka'ava l'data di Yisrael mishari. How is that allowed? If he's doing it for the interest of the Yisrael, it's as though the Yisrael is instructing him to do it. So how does the Mishnah allow it? Says the Gemara, there's a difference. Nachri l'daitei de nafshei avid. A nachri acts on behalf of his own personal interests. He knows he's going to get rewarded for his efforts. So even though he sees that the Yisrael standing by, thereby is pleased with what he's doing, he's still doing it for his own interest, for his own sake, and therefore there's no concern. So once again, when the katan is doing it l'das Yisrael, then it is as though the Yisrael is instructing him to do it, and he cannot allow the katan to do it. In contrast with the guy who is doing it l'data de nafshei, for his own personal interests. So in summary, if there's a fire that broke out on Shabbos, so if a nachri comes along, the Mishnah tells us, we may not tell him kabeh, go put out the fire. Nor do we need to discourage him. We don't need to tell him al techabe. Rav Ami says a chiddush. One can announce, kol ha'mechabe einei mafsid. Whoever extinguishes the fire will not go unrewarded. The Gemara tells us, even if the Yisrael shows approval and it appears as though the guy is doing it, acting on behalf of the Yisrael's interest, there's no concern, because the Nachri is always going to be doing it adaita de nafshei, acting for his own interests. Regarding a katan who comes to extinguish the fire, we can't tell him kabeg, go put it out. Regarding discouraging him, that's a machlekes. Depends on the question, the general question of whether we are obligated to prevent a katan from doing an isser. Certainly you cannot tell him kol machabe in a mafsid. And if he is doing it to seek approval, he's doing it as acting on behalf of the interest of the father, as the Farshim point out, not specifically the father. The father here is simply an example. But if he's acting l'das Yisrael, we see that he's doing it in response to the approval that he's receiving from the Yisrael. So he's acting on behalf of the interest of Yisrael. Then even a katan would be asr. Continues the Mishnah. Kaifen ka'ara al gabi haner. One may go ahead and overturn a ka'ara, this bowl, on top of a lamp, on top of a candle, so that the flame doesn't catch onto the beam, onto the ceiling. What is the chiddush here? Because he's actually moving a ka'ara for the sake of something which is muktzah. So this is a discussion we had earlier in the Masechta, different interpretations of this Mishnah. Continues the Mishnah about Tzoy Shel Katan. One may bring a ka'ara and be kaifet, turn it upside down on top of the waist of a katan. Ve'al akrav shaloi tishach. Likewise, you can place it over a scorpion to prevent it from stinging. So apparently the Tanakama holds there's no concern of a malacha of tzeda here, because the Tanakama is following the shita of Rabbi Shimon, who holds that a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. One does a malacha which is not needed for its own defined purpose. His intention here is not to trap the scorpion, but merely to get it out of the way, to prevent harm. So therefore, he's allowed to do this because it is a situation which involves harm, and therefore he's allowed to go ahead and trap the scorpion. So this is the sheet of Tanakama. Omar Yehuda, Ma'aseh ba. there was an incident of one who trapped a scorpion on Shabbos. So this incident came in front of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. Ma'aseh ba lefnei Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai ba'arav. So this incident was presented before Rabbi Yochanan ba'arav, in this town Arav. V'amar, he said, I'm concerned that perhaps this person who trapped the scorpion is obligated, is liable to chatas. Apparently Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai holds like Rabbi Yehuda, that a melacha she'ein el tzricha l'gufa, even if he does it not for its own defined purpose, he's merely trying to get it out of the way, that is considered to be a melacha of tzeda. And therefore perhaps he needs to bring a chatas. Now why only cheshishani? Why do I suspect, or am I concerned about chatas? Why didn't he absolutely say that there's a chatas here? So the Farshim point out, because we had a machlokes earlier regarding the melacha of tzeda when it comes to something which is not ordinarily trapped for its own sake, for its hide, for its own value. For instance, a scorpion, it's not something which is generally trapped for its own sake. So there's a machlokes whether or not the melacha of tzeda applies to that. So that was the basis of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai's uncertainty here, whether we hold that there's tzeda even in this case or not. Continues the Gemara. Rav Yehuda, there's a story of Rav Yehuda and Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba and Rav Chana bar Rava. So these three individuals, Iklu, they visited Lebei Abin Debin Nishikya. So they visited the home of this person, Abin Debin Nishikya. The Rav Yehuda of Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Aisu Lu Puryaisa. So for the these two people, Rav Yehuda and Rav Yirmiyah Abba, they brought beds, benches to sit on. The Rav Chana bar Rava, however, to the third individual, Rav Chana bar Rava, Lo Yaisu, they didn't bring a bed to sit on. So they didn't hold him in the same, regard him in the same stature as the other people. Ashkechei. So Rav Chana bar Abba, he noticed that the host, whose name was Abin, he noticed that Masnei Librei, that he was teaching a Mishnah to his son, as follows: Val tzoya shel katan bnei katan. So the Mishnah says that one may invert a ka'ar, a bowl, on top of the tzoya of a katan, the waist of a katan, we play katan to prevent the katan, the minor, from getting soiled, getting entangled at the waist. That's how he presented our Mishnah. He had this version. Hamalei, so Rav Chana bar Abba turned to him and says, Abin Shatya, Abin the fool, Masnei Shtusi Livnei, he teaches foolishness to his son. This version is incorrect. He's speaking about covering over the tzoya of a katan. It in itself is prepared, stands to be used, is ready for klavim to nibble at it. Therefore, it's not muktzah. Why do you need to cover it over and hide it? Just pick it up and get out of the way. It's not muktzah. It's muchan. It's prepared for klavim. Perhaps you'll say, since it was brought about today, it didn't exist yesterday. So it wasn't fit for the dog from yesterday, meaning from the onset of Shabbos. In which case, perhaps it's muktzah, because it wasn't around at the beginning of Shabbos, considered to be noila, the new phenomenon, and therefore one's mind was not on it, and it's considered to be separate and get it out of the way and muktzah. But haven't we learned in a brisa? When it comes to Yom Tov, we find a similar case where it's not muktzah. These rivers which are flowing, these springs which are spouting forth. So the water within them, if one draws this water, we know there's a halacha of tchumen, that a person and his possessions may only stay within an area of 2,000 amma. So, generally speaking, at least some shittas hold that even a thing which is hefker has a din of tchum, and it can only be taken 2,000 amma from the location in which it was at rest at the beginning of Shabbos. But these naharis, these waters which were moving along, they never had their kinyan shvisa. They never attained a shvisa at the onset of Shabbos, because they were constantly on the go, they were constantly in motion. They have no din of tchum. They have no defined boundary. And therefore, their tchum is dependent on the person who draws them. They are like the feet of any person that draws them, and therefore they attain his boundaries. Okay, so that's a din regarding tchumen. But in any rate, we see that these waters aren't muktzah, even though they were inaccessible, they were far away, out of reach, at the point of the onset of Shabbos. Nevertheless, we see they're not muktzah, because apparently since it's expected that the water will show up, it's predictable, so his mind is on it. It's considered to be that it's designed and designated and reserved for this person's use. It's not considered to be muktzah. Likewise, when it comes to the tzoya of the katan, which is expected to arrive on Shabbos, so we consider it to be mukhan, prepared for the use of the klavim, and it's not muktzah. So this person's version of the Mishnah seems to be incorrect. Why would one have to go and cover up the tzoya shel katan? Apparently the tzoya is muktzah. It's not muktzah, because it's mukhan, it's suitable for the klavim. So Abban responded, he said, okay, so I'm wrong, so how should I do it? What's the correct version? Ve'ela hechi isnai, how should I teach him? So he said, Eima, you should say, al tzoya shel tarnagolim b'pnei katan, that he's coming to cover over the tzoya of the tarnagolim, of the chickens, which are not fit for dogs, and he covers them b'pnei katan, on account of the katan, prevent him from getting soiled. So that's the correct version of the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, why does he need to cover up the tzoya shel tarnagolim v'tepikle? Why can't he simply derive a heter regarding the moving of this type of tzoya? Davi graf shel rei, because it's regarded like the vessel which contains the rei, the waste. As we know, the Chacham allowed one to transport this kli, this graf shel rei, because it's repulsive, it's offensive. One can go ahead and vacate it, move it out of the room, move it out of the area. So likewise, in the case of tzoya shel tarnagolim, why doesn't he go and try himself to cover it? Let him simply pick it up and get rid of it. Perhaps he'll say that this allowance of graf sharei is only when he carries the waste agav mana, only when it's on account of the vessel, it's inside the kli. So he's transporting it indirectly. Agav mana in, yes, only then. But the actual waste itself directly, he cannot carry. Says the Gemara. But that's not the case. Vahu achbar, there was a story of this mouse, the shtakach, which was found bis parmiki, the Rav Ashi, amongst the b'samim, the spices of Rav Ashi. Va'amalin, he told him, Nekutu b'tzusisei, go grab him by his tail, va'avkua, and take him out, avkua. So you see that one can actually directly handle something which is offensive. So why does he need to trouble himself to cover this waste, which is not muktzah? So we're speaking about the tzoya shel tarnagolim was found in the ashpa, in the heap of trash, in which case it's not present in front of him, and there's no need to really remove it. There's no heter, which is generally applied to the graf shel rei, which is sitting in the person's presence. So in this case, there's no heter. There's no allowance to directly move the tzoya. He has to cover it. Says the Gemara, but why is he covering it? To prevent the katan from getting soiled. The katan ba'ashma boile. What's the katan doing in the ashpa? So we're speaking about the tzoya shel tarnagolim was actually found in the courtyard, where the katan is present. Says, well, 1 second. Chatzar nami. Even when the tzoya is found in the chatzar, nami graf shel rei. Even there, it's considered to be a graf shel rei. Why can he go and directly remove the tzoya? Says, well, but ashpa shebachatzer. We're speaking about that. It's in the chatzar, but it's in the ashpa, in the heap of trash, in the dump in the chatzar. So on the one hand, it doesn't have the kula of graf shel rei because it's in the ashpa. It's not considered to be in the person's presence. It's not offensive to the person. Therefore, there's no allowance to actually pick it up and clean it out of the chatzar. On the other hand, since it's in the chatzar, it's the courtyard where the katan is roaming around, so he's concerned that the katan will get soiled, and therefore he's allowed to go and cover. Therefore, he goes ahead and he covers the tzoya to prevent the katan from approaching it. Continues the Gemara. Val akrav shlei tishach, the Mishnah discussed placing a bull on top of a scorpion to prevent it from biting. On Rabbi Shimon Levi, kol hamazikin, all the lethal creatures which have the ability to kill, kol hamazikin ne'erogim b'Shabbos, they may be killed on Shabbos on sight, even if they're not actually attacking or chasing somebody. So he's teaching us a chiddush. Not only may one trap a scorpion to prevent harm, he may even go ahead and kill the mazikin on Shabbos. Now apparently Rabbi Shimon Levi is following the shita of Rabbi Shimon, who holds that a davar, a malacha she'ena tzricha l'gufa, the malacha which is not needed for its own sake, he's not killing it for the sake of killing, doing this malacha of shaycha, tils neshama, he's simply trying to prevent harm, he's removing this harmful creature. Therefore, it's not considered to be a malacha min ha-Torah. Now, I mean, the Rabbanah, certainly one is not allowed to engage in a malacha she'ena tzricha l'gufa, but this case is different because it's speaking about killing a creature which has the ability to kill, to be mazik, and therefore the Chum allowed him to do so, to go ahead and remove potential harm and hazard. Mosav Rav Yosef, the Brisa says, Chamisha ne'eragim b'Shabbos. Only 5 creatures, which are considered to be, they're prone to attacking, to getting aroused and attacking. Only those may one kill on site. These are the 5. Zvuv Sheberetz Mitzrayim, this fly in Egypt, Vitzira, this wasp, Shebeninveh, is very specific creatures. Va'akrav, this scorpion, Shebechadayev, in this place Chadayev, V'nocha, Sheberetz Yisrael, a snake of Eretz Yisrael, V'kelav Shoyte B'chol Makayim, and any place a person encounters a mad dog. So the the Brisa limits this allowance to only 5 specific creatures, which are known to be extra dangerous. But any other type of lethal creature which is not presently attacking, pursuing a person, one may not kill it on Shabbos. Says Gemara Mani, who is the shita of this Brisa? Ilay Rabbi Yehuda. Is this Brisa reflecting Rabbi Yehuda's shita? Ha'amar malacha she'ena tzricha l'gufa chayav aleh. He maintains that one does a malacha she'ena tzricha l'gufa, which is not needed for its own sake. For instance, killing this creature, he's chayav. It's a malacha min ha-Torah. Certainly, there will be no room for leniency. The Brisa can't conceivably be following Rabbi Yehuda's shita to allow killing these animals on sight. So if they're chasing a person, then it's a question of saving a person's life. Pikuach nefesh, all agree that's mutter. But to allow killing just unprovoked, on sight, to remove potential harm, certainly Rabbi Yehuda would not allow that. So this Brisa certainly can't be following Rabbi Yehuda. Ela lav. So it must be that the Brisa is Reb Shimon, who holds a malacha she'ena tzricha l'gufa is pater. Now, generally, it's an issa d'Rabbanan, but in the case of removing potential harm, the Rabbanan would allow. Okay, so that explains the Brisa. Now, the Brisa limits this to 5. Vahani hudishari. Only with regard to these specific creatures, it is mutter to kill them. Rini loy, but others not. So this is in contrast. Rabbi Shimon Levi told us that all types of lethal creatures may be killed on Shabbos. Rabbi Yirmiyah, Uman Leimelon, who's going to tell us that this Brisa is correct, is accurate? Perhaps it's an inaccurate Brisa. How can you ask a kasha from this Brisa to Rabbi Shimon Levi? Perhaps it's not reliable. Rabbi Yosef, I learned this Brisa, I've included in my repertoire of Brisas, and actually I asked from this Brisa on Rabbi Shimon Levi. And likewise I answered the kasha from the Brisa of Rabbi Shimon Levi, that Rabbi Shimon Levi was actually speaking about a case where Rotzu Achrav, where they were chasing him, they were attacking him. And therefore, it's a question of pikuach nefesh, saving life. In this case, all agree. Even Rabbi Yehuda agrees. Certainly, one may kill the mazik. The Brisa, which only limits it to 5 specific types of creatures, is speaking about unprovoked. They're not chasing him. In which case, the allowance is only applied to these 5 creatures, as we said, we're following Shittas Reb Shimon. Is potter. And in the case of removing these harmful creatures, it is mutter even d'Rabbanan. Continues the Gemara, Tani Tana Kamed Rava, says Tana, this Chacham who was proficient in Brises, so he presented the following Brise in front of Rabba bar Avuna. One who kills snakes and scorpions on Shabbos. All types, not just that specific one of the Nachash Beis Yisrael. Any type of snake or scorpion. So, once again, we're speaking about types of snakes and scorpions which are lethal, obviously. And if one kills them on Shabbos, the ruach, the spirit of pious people, of Hasidim, is not satisfied with him. Why is he killing creatures on Shabbos? So Rabbi Rav Huna responded Just the opposite. And those Chasidim who are unhappy, displeased with this fellow, the spirit of Chachamim are not pleased with them. Because a person is meant to go ahead and kill these creatures even on Shabbos to prevent potential harm. Upligad Rav Huna. Now Rabba bar Rav Huna, so Rabba the son of Rav Huna, is in dispute with his own father Rav Huna, who did not allow killing these creatures on Shabbos. As we see from the following story, Rav Huna Chazi, Rav Huna Sola, who gave this certain person, the Kokatel Zibura, that he killed a bee on Shabbos. Amar later, Rav Huna told him, what did you accomplish? Did you finish them all off? You killed this one, there's another one there. So what's the point? So it's clear that Rav Huna was expressing his disapproval upon this fellow killing a mazik on Shabbos, a harmful creature. But apparently, there's a shita here which allows, Rabbi Rav Huna allows killing all types of lethal creatures on Shabbos, even if they're not pursuing him, if they're not attacking him. So apparently, Rabbi Shulman Levi, mentioned earlier in the Gemara, does hold likewise that one may go ahead and kill all types of lethal creatures on Shabbos, even if they're not chasing him. It's mutter because he's removing potential harm and hazard. So in summary, if these lethal creatures are chasing a person, attacking a person, certainly can kill them. What if they're not chasing him? Then according to Shimon Levi, it's mutter, as we explained, because the malacha she'enat tzricha legufa is pater. This is an example of a malacha that's not needed for its own sake, for its own defined purpose. He's simply trying to remove something harmful. Generally speaking, one cannot do a malacha she'enat tzricha legufa. It's asam d'rabbanan, but in this case, the chacham allowed. The Bryce, however, limits this allowance to 5 specific creatures which are known to be super harmful. They're prone to attacking, and therefore only over there does the Chacham allow. We're going to learn soon regarding the halacha of Deiros V'Tumoi. That's coming up in the Gemara. Continues the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Bryce. This is Damnalu Nechashim Akravim. If one encounters Nechashim, Akravim, snakes, scorpions, they cross his path. Hargan. So if he managed to kill them, Yodua Shenizdamnu Hargan. Let it be known that they were presented to him from heaven, so that he should have the schus, the merit of killing them, because these things are harmful to people, and he was given the task and the schus, the opportunity to prevent harm and damage from others. As Rashi brings the lashon megalgal and schus, they present a schus to be done, be performed al yidei zakai, by a person who is a zakai. However, loy hargan, but if he didn't manage to kill them, then he's meant to derive a different lesson. Then let it be known that they were sent to harm him, to kill him. And a nace from Shemayim took place and spared him from harm. And he's meant to do tshuva, because apparently he was destined, he was deserving of harm. He was spared through a nace. So that gives room for introspection, for tshuva. Amar Ula v'itema Rabba Rav Chana Amar Yechon. We're speaking about specifically B'nai Shofim Bay, when they were hissing at him, in which case it's obvious that they were after him. Continues the Gemara. Amar Abba Bar Kahana Pamachas. There was once a story that Nofal Echad b'Beis HaMedrash, that a snake showed up in the Beis HaMedrash. This was on Shabbos. V'amad Niyosi Echad. This fellow from the place called Niyosi, they called him Niyosi on account of the place where he came from, which was Noyos. So this fellow got up, and he killed a snake on Shabbos. Amar Rebbe. So Rebbe responded with the following statement: Paga boy, kayoitze boy. A similar one to the snake struck the snake. Now we're unsure as what was his exact intention. Was he expressing approval or disapproval? Says so they asked, what does he mean? The shaper of it, that he did well? Rava was expressing his approval, he was complimenting him, that a similar one to the snake, meaning just as a snake is dangerous to people, this fellow turned out to be very dangerous for this snake. So it was a stamp of approval. for killing the snake on Shabbos because he removed the harmful creature. Or perhaps just the opposite. He meant to criticize this person. A similar one to the snake, meaning just as the snake is wicked, this fellow also did an act of which was inappropriate. So he's similar to the snake in this regard. So was it an expression of approval or disapproval? Tashma, come and hear the following right. The Rav Abba Brei, the Rav Chib Abba, Rav Zera. So these two people, Rav Abba the son of Chib Abba and Rav Zera, Havu Yasvi, they were sitting Akila Dvei Rav Yanai, at the doorway of the home of Rav Yanai. Nafek Milsa B'Benayu. A word came out from between them as follows. Boy Meim Rav Yanai, they asked Rav Yanai, Ma'ula Harag Nechashim Akrav M'Shabbos. What is the halacha regarding killing snakes and scorpions on Shabbos? Obviously, we're not speaking about that they're chasing him, that they're attacking him. But is there a heter to kill them on the spot, on site, to remove something which has potential harm? Omar Lahu, so he told them, no problem. Tzirani Harig. I'm accustomed to killing a wasp on Shabbos. Nachash v'akav l'kolshke. Certainly, a snake and a scorpion may be killed on Shabbos. So you have a right that Rav Yanai allows killing these things on Shabbos, even when they're not chasing him. Apparently he holds removal of potential harm as mutter when we're speaking about lethal creatures. Now, Rav Yanai was actually a Talmud of a Rebbe. So this is indicative somewhat of Rebbe's position as well. Perhaps we have a right from here that Rebbe meant to compliment this fellow who killed a snake on Shabbos, because indeed he holds that one is meant to remove these harmful creatures. Says the Gemara, there's no riot. Perhaps when Rav Yanai says one can kill, he's not speaking about directly killing the snake. Dilma, perhaps Lefi Tumai. We're speaking about one who's merely walking along, Lefi Tumai, meaning innocently, and by the way, he steps on a snake. In which case it would be mutter. But to directly kill a snake would be asur. Who do we find this concept? Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Roik, if one spots roik, spittle, which is repulsive, down on the floor, dorsh lefi tumai. He may step on it lefi tumai as he's walking innocently. We're not concerned about smoothing out the earth, which is a malach on Shabbos. He's just walking along without any kavana of smoothing out the earth. It's mutter. From Rav Sheshes, nachash, dorsh lefi tumai. Likewise, when it comes to killing a snake, he may go ahead and step on it lefi tumai as he's walking along. From Rav Katina Akrav, a scorpion as well, dorsh lefi tumai. Let's take a look at Rashi here. 4 lines from the bottom of the Amid in Rashi, in the middle of the line there, Dilma lefi tumai. Says Rashi, Lo sheyamad olav yahargenu. We're not speaking about getting up and actually directly killing the snake. Lehedya, straight away. Elo k'shu hoylech tumai. Rather, when he's walking along, and there's a snake or scorpion in his way. He doesn't have to turn away from the creature. He can just keep on walking, step on it, and walk along. And if it results in the creature dying through his stepping on it, fine. Since he didn't intend on killing it. The Davashem Neskaven, the Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbananu, because doing a malacha in a case of ein meskaven, when there's an incidental malacha resulting from his primary maisa, which he had no intention on doing, it's also contributed, but it's only midrabanan. Midrabananu. Ulini mazikim like gozer, pertaining to mazikim, such in this case of harmful creatures, the Chachamim did not prohibit. Roik, dorish lefi tumai, shein meskaven l'mareyach. He has no intention of smoothing out, spit out the pits in the ground. Although it's happening on its own. When he has no kavanah to do it, it's mutter, on account of its offensiveness. So it seems like this is agreed upon by all, that killing these creatures, lefi tumai, while he's walking along, is mutter. So this basically undoes the raya. We want to know what Rav's opinion was, whether he meant to approve of this person's action. We're not sure now, because when Rav Yanai says one may kill, perhaps he's speaking about in this specific scenario of doing it lefi tumai. But to directly, lehedya, as Rashi says, to directly kill this creature, perhaps it's also. Continues the Gemara with a story, Abba bar Marta, who Abba bar Menumi. So Abba bar Marta, who is also called Abba bar Menumi, have a maski be devei Reish Galusa Zuzi. So devei Reish Galusa, the fellows of the Reish Galusa, the head of the Galus, he owed them money. I see you. So they brought him Kamitzarle, and they tormented him so that he pays back his loan. Havashadi Ruk. Now there was some roik, some of this spittle, repulsive saliva present there. Amar Reish Galusa, so the Reish Galusa instructed the people there, Aisu Mana, bring a utensil, schifil away and place it on, turn it upside down over this, the roik, to get it out of sight. Amar Lahu, so Abba Bamarta, who was present, he told him, you don't need to burden yourself and do this. Hacham Rabbi Yehuda. This is what Rabbi Yehuda said. Roik, if one spots this offensive roik, dorsal vitumai, he can simply walk and step on it innocently, by the way. So you don't even go bring a utensil to cover it. Amar lahu. So now the Reish Galusa heard that this fellow is an educated fellow. He told him, Tzubim Rabbananu. So he told his people there, this person's a Tzubim Rabbananu. He's a young Talmud Chacham. Shavku, leave him alone. And this is the way he got out of his predicament. So in summary, regarding killing these mazikim, these lethal creatures, if they're chasing him, it's a situation of pikuach nefesh. Certainly there's no question he can kill them all. What if they're not chasing him? And according to one opinion, the Gemara, Shoban Levi, the Gemara said the same opinion is held by Rabbi Rav Huna. He may go ahead and kill them to remove potential hazard. According to the Brisa, this heter only applies to specifically 5 creatures which are known to be super lethal and prone to attacking people. The Gemara concluded regarding doyrus lefi tumai, if one is walking along and encounters these creatures, in this case it will be mutter as well. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with a discussion about tvila b'zman mitzvah. Is there a mitzvah, an obligation to be tovel at the appointed time? Or can one delay to a different time, to a different day? Or machlekes between the Tanakama, who maintains, yes, the tefillah b'zman is mitzvah, whereas Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda holds tefillah b'zman alav mitzvah. We proceeded with the Mishnah regarding a fire that broke out on Shabbos, and a nachri came to put it out. We cannot tell him to do so. We can't instruct him to put it out. That's an ism d'Rabbanan. We don't have to discourage him as well. One can announce, if one extinguishes his fire, he won't lose. He won't go unrewarded. The Gemara tells us that even if he's doing it l'das Yisrael, he sees that the Yisrael approves of his action. It's mutter because the Nachri is ultimately doing it for his own self-interest. Regarding a katan, we cannot instruct him to put out a fire. Do we need to discourage him when he comes to put it out? Oh, machlekes. One cannot say kol machabe ein mafsid to a katan. And if the katan is evidently acting on behalf of the interest of the Yisrael, it is asur. The Mishnah taught us that one may cover a nair with a bowl to protect the ceiling from catching fire. He may cover that tzaya, which is muktzah, as the Gemara told us, we're speaking about the tzaya shetani goyim, which is muktzah. He may cover that with a bowl. He may cover a scorpion to prevent harm. According to Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, trapping a scorpion, even in this manner, presents a possible chiyuv chatos regarding actually killing those lethal creatures on Shabbos. So if they're chasing a person, certainly it's mutter, it's pekuach nefesh. If they're not chasing a person, then according to Shimon Levi, it's mutter because he's removing potential harm. According to the Brisa, this allowance is only regarding those specific 5 creatures which are liable, which are prone to attacking people. The Gemara concluded, if one is walking along and he encounters any of these creatures, he can simply continue walking and step on that creature. Doyrus lefi tumai. This halacha applies to the roik as well. Chacham allowed that since he's not being mechaven, which is allowed in a situation of mazikim and something which is mos, which is offensive and repulsive. And we conclude with the story of this young Talmud Chacham who was well aware of this halacha, and he earned his freedom as a result of this knowledge.